In August 2014, Islamic State came to northern Iraq out of Syria. They went first to Sinjar in northwestern Iraq, and they spent about a week in Sinjar town and the surrounding villages. They gave the Yazidi living in the towns and the villages the opportunity to convert to Islam or not. And those who didn't convert had, well, very few converted. I don't know anybody that converted. Islamic State killed the men, took them off and killed them. The old women they sent out on buses to areas that they didn't control because they were of no value to them. And the young women and children they took into slavery. More or less from the get-go, those women started to be released or escaped from Islamic State. And at one stage, there was a program funded by the Germans, very quietly, nobody would know anything about it, who were providing $10,000 funding to buy children back from Islamic State. And this is a trade that was going on over WhatsApp and social media through smugglers. And the girls were passed from, they were traded in auctions in Raqqa. They were passed from one fighter to another. But as Islamic State came under pressure, they lost Mosul, and the amount of territory they controlled shrank. They started to offload their assets, and more and more girls managed to escape or were brought back, giving fighters money in the pocket for them to bail out. What we're about to see is the first time that I met my friend Susan, who's a wonderful humanitarian lady. I think she's 25 now, 26. I think when we met, she was 20 or 21. She's worked in humanitarian aid all of her grown-up life. She lives in Dahuk. She's from a very large family. She's a twin. She has 2 or 3 more sets of twin sisters, 3 brothers, and an exhausted mother and a rich father, I suspect. She's been working with an organization called the Gender Organization, which means rebirth. Gender Organization run by a female MP called Chiman Rashid, who's been involved in female issues, women's issues for many years. When Islamic State came and the women started to return from captivity, the first who returned were killed by their families for bringing dishonor onto their families. Chiman established a center where the girls who returned could come and stay and reconstitute. And eventually a system was put in place where they could go and spend a few days, wash, get clean, buy new clothes, go and be re-blessed by Baba Sheikh, the head of the Yazidi religion, and then be returned to their families. So something useful and worthwhile. Khalsa Aid is a British charity, as a British Sikh charity. I used to be a broker years ago up in Leeds, and I sat on the same desk as a Sikh guy, Amajit Bansal Singh, very nice guy, who 10 years after we last met said, "I'm coming to Iraq, I know you're there, do you want to meet up?" So Amajit is a trustee of Khalsa Aid. We arranged to meet up in Erbil, and after I'd been working in Iraq for a couple of years, everywhere I went, I'd been protected by armed PSD guys and running around in armored cars. He rang up, I flew up to meet him in Erbil, and I jumped in a soft skin run by a civvy with no guns and spent a few days with him in Dahuk. It felt unusual to step outside of the gilded cage in which I'd normally lived. But I went up, met him, and spent a few days with him, and took these photographs along the way, which hopefully you'll find interesting. So these are the first family that I met. No men left in this family. The woman on the right, or the women on the right, that's her daughter, who just within the previous week been released or escaped from Islamic State. They still had one child, one daughter held in captivity, but pleased to get at least one out. A lot of the Yazidi that was supported by Khalsa Aid and by Susan weren't living in the big refugee camps. So at one stage, something like a third of the population of Iraqi Kurdistan was made up of refugees who'd fled from Islamic State. It's like the biggest migration of population since the end of the Second World War, when the Eastern Europeans fled in the face of the advancing Soviet armies. Just a huge population migration. And those people either got into the refugee camps being run by the United Nations, or were hosted by Kurdish families. And I have friends who gave up rooms in their house to look after Yazidi families and Arab families, to be fair, and others who were squatting like these guys on building sites. Yazidism predates Islam, predates Christianity. It's a religion that goes back something like 7,000 years. If you research them, and I haven't done much, they've suffered something like 27 genocides in their time. At one stage, they migrated from northwestern Iraq and southern Turkey all the way to India to escape genocide and came back. And there is some suggestion, I think, that gypsies in the UK and Europe came from India. And when I took this photograph and look at them now, it just reminds me of a gypsy kid, and I'm expecting somebody in the background to ask how much for your dog. And I wonder if there's some relationship between the two. So these guys were living in a building site. We went off and dropped with them really simple stuff: washing powder, soap, simple bits of cooking oil, rice, the basic fundamentals. Wherever we went, we turned up in a truck. The families who were entitled to receive the aid would gather, and wherever we went, others who weren't entitled because their name wasn't on the list would come and lobby for support also. And to some degree, this reminded me a bit of Schindler's List. It's not the individual name that counts; it's the inconvenience to the list. If your name is on the list, you're getting the aid from Khalsa. If your name isn't on the list, you're not, and that's just the way it is. Difficult for Khalsa to choose who to support and who not in the face of so much need. I don't know how they do it in detail. I think they're looking after around 600 families. Most of those, as I say, those families were the families that had girls held still in captivity by Islamic State. I took this photograph at one particular aid drop. This is a lady who was trying to get support for her family. She wasn't getting it. And just a complete loss of agency on her part. I don't know how you, I, or our families would cope in those same situations, let's say. I kind of like this. It's high key, and I like the one face looking back. All the ladies waiting inside the tent while we're offloading the aid on the outside. And the kids are just brilliant. It doesn't matter what situation you put children in, by and large, so long as they're loved and hugged, they'll be relatively content. And I took this photograph, and it just made me realize that no matter how difficult we might think our past year has been, so long as we can put shoes on the feet of our children, we're not doing too badly. I took this, I forget the name of the camp. This ended up on the wall in the office in London as well. I don't know what it is about children and guns. If you don't have they're all toy guns. If you don't have toy guns, I'll pick up a piece of wood and use a piece of wood as a gun. And I wouldn't read too much into it other than that guns do give you power. They give you power over your immediate surroundings. And maybe that's what it is that a kid likes to think they have when they pick up a toy gun or they turn a piece of wood into a gun. The fact that they have some control over what's going on around them. Who knows? Nothing so much to say about these photographs, really. We spent 2 days going around lots of different little encampments where small numbers of people were living, trying to give some support. Council Aid were very good. Lady on the bottom right there is a National Health Service psychiatric nurse and artist who came to do some art therapy with the children. In this particular photograph, this lady is living in a tent outside of a refugee camp, essentially squatting with a disabled son. Her son was a middle-aged son, bedridden. Really a terrible situation for everybody. And yet, as I say, the kids wherever you go are always sort of cheerful and buoyant. So that was a couple of days that I spent back in late, I think it was 2016, December 2016. That got me involved with Susan and with Council Aid a little bit, but more directly with Susan. And I've done a few fundraising events for her since then. I mean, I raised about $5,000 from a friend who'd run a raffle and had more money than he knew what to do with. I said, "Give it to me," and we ran this wonderful event in the mountains over the Hook for the girls who were living in the camps. But because there's been a genocide, it's not the right thing to do culturally to be seen to sing and dance and have fun. And we wanted for International Women's Day to get them out of the camps. And so we hired a small fleet of minibuses. We laid on food. We put on music, and we got them to come, and we got them singing and dancing and having fun. And these are not brilliant portraits taken in direct sunlight with too much flash and blown highlights and everything else. But I kind of like it because they're IDPs, they're refugees. They are, I don't know their personal stories, but they have fled from Islamic State. I don't know if they were taken by Islamic State. And I like this photograph because I hope that it makes you think, because refugees in most of our minds are people who live in huts in Africa. They're not supposed to have pigtails and wear dungarees. And, you know, that could be my daughter or yours. Um, we had a good day. We had a good day. We had, I don't know what I don't know what it is about the balloons, but they love the balloons. Bought loads of balloons, and everybody at the end had a balloon, and then we had a sort of a balloon releasing session, which was kind of fun. Um, Last couple of photographs, I think, on this. This is Chiman Rashid on the left, who's the lady that's organising everything. Don't know who her pal is there. And then on the right is my pal Susan and her sister Helen, who came up for the day. And that's the gang that we entertained. So that was kind of a useful and worthwhile thing to do. I think what I'm going to do now is just flick forward really quickly and not talk through this lot so much. That photograph was in the Sunday Times recently. I think Times or Telegraph last weekend. Only it wasn't my photograph. Exactly the same place, taken from the same place. The rocks are in the same place, but it doesn't have the guy with the gun there. There's a story for that, but we ain't got time for it. And there's a story for this as well. We haven't got time for it. I'll tell one quick story. This lady was married when she was 13. Her husband died when she was 19. He gave her 7 sons along the way. All of the sons were taken by Islamic State and have not been seen again. She's now living with her daughter-in-laws. There are still children being produced. I'm not entirely sure where they're coming from. And I've been going back to see this family on and off for the last 2 or 3 years. And actually, that portrait, the last time I liked that a lot, and I printed that out when I came home. And I'm taking these with GFX 50S. It's a medium format, semi-medium format camera. I printed that out and framed that and took it back for them. And these guys have seen me several times now. And they're happy for me to go and take their photographs. And I've asked them expressly if they're content to be photographed. And they are, well, 2014 is when Islamic State came. We're now 6 years on from that. They are delighted for their stories to be told because they're starting to feel forgotten, let's say. So decent to get out and go and meet them. There's her. There's the matriarch with some of her grandchildren and maybe great grandchildren. They're difficult people to photograph. Girl on the right, don't know her name. I'd love to work with a reporter who's better at taking notes. I'm all right at doing the snapping. I'm not so good at making notes. Lady on the left is actually bright, cheerful, convivial. But every time you get the camera out, the requirement to remember the genocide comes in. And this is the expression she creates, which is fine. And I completely understand it. Girl on the right is living with distant relatives because all of the rest of her family, her immediate family, were killed by Islamic State. I don't know how long she was held by them and how long she's been out, but I thought she was particularly photogenic. I think she's got extended family in Germany, and hopefully she'll be able to get over to them at some stage.